Hi, Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade. Grab your favorite malt or Green River, make sure you are wide awake, and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Hello, folks. Thank you for joining us again today. It's always a pleasure to have you in our audience and to have you explore the 1950s with us. Today is number 133 in our Fun Chats. And Jackie, we have another outstanding guest who can tell us about this awesome 94-year-old organization in North Dakota.
Yes. And to begin with, I always like to have our viewers note the purple banner on the bottom of the screen. www.wildthewindmillwatch.com is where you'll find all sorts of information about the book, which you see in the upper right-hand corner, and about the vendors, the places where the authors may be appearing, and the 1950s Fun Chat. We have, as Janine mentioned, quite a few there with a variety of people from all over the world, actually. So we would encourage you to take a look at those. Also, upper right-hand corner, that little book has a beautiful North Dakota sunset wrapping around on its cover. And see that little white dot there? That is a very special prize that the book received in 2022. It's won the Independent Press Award for in the regional category and was awarded the Distinguished Favorite honor. So let's get going. So now those of you who have watched the 1950s Fun Chat know a little bit about it and how it even began. Well, the 1950s Fun Chat has evolved from chatting with guests who were born in the 1950s to guests being influenced by the 1950s to educating ourselves and our audiences with a variety of topics having influence before, during, and after the decade of the 50s. So it's quite encompassing. So this young lady, Julie Ellingson, was born in 1974. She's a graduate of Mandan, North Dakota High School, Bismarck State College, and North Dakota State University, where she studied mass communications and general agriculture, was active in collegiate judging teams, the Post-Secondary Agricultural Students Organization, the Saddle and Sirloin Club, Student Government, and college newspapers. Julie is a fourth-generation registered Angus breeder from St. Anthony, North Dakota. She, her husband, Chad, and their family operate the Ellingson Angus ranch where Julie was raised. The family has an extensive artificial insemination and embryo transplant program, hosts an annual production sale each February, and takes pride in helping its customers market their feeder calves and replacement females. Julie is the Executive Vice President of the North Dakota Stockmen's Association, and we're going to learn more about that today. Julie, welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So you were not yet born during the decade of the 1950s, but tell us how the 1950s influenced you in any way.
You know, in preparation for this discussion, I hadn't really thought of that before. I've had the opportunity to work for the Stockmen's Association most of my career. And so I thought about lots of different milestones and such before. But until this opportunity, I hadn't really specifically thought about the 1950s and how that was instrumental into our organization. But wow, as I did my own research, it was really enlightening to me of how many incredible milestones for the livestock industry as well as our organization occurred during the 1950s decade. You know, thinking back, there's a couple of significant things maybe we'll talk about later, but the Stockmen's Association just recently moved into a new headquarters. Well, that was something that happened back in 1952. In 1950, for the first time, the headquarters office for the association moved from Minot to Bismarck. And so that was a monumental change, as you can imagine. A couple of other things that were significant as I can think about for the organization. In 1953, what was known as the Bar North, now the North Dakota Stockman magazine, became the mouthpiece for the organization, a communication tool for members from the organization leaders to members. And that magazine that continues to be a mainstay of our organization now. And that, again, was in 1950s.
Hey, Julie, I'm curious to know, does the North Dakota Stockmen's Association magazine, formerly known as Bar North, still feature the colors of is it yellow and black on the front cover?
Oh, you have a great memory. So yes, the yellow and black cover, it donned that for many decades. Over the years, it did evolve, and so color printing and such, and the colored cover now is what we see. But certainly, that was an iconic piece that you could sure find in your mailbox, right?
Very true. Yes, very true.
So I have another magazine question. That is can it be found online also? Can you purchase a subscription for an online?
Yeah. That's a great question. There's certain elements and features that can be found on our website, ndstockmen.org. The magazine itself, we're unable to sell individual subscriptions because it has to be tied to the membership through IRS rules or whatever it has to be. So it has to be intrinsic. There's a couple little teasers that you can find on our website. And anybody who's interested in a subscription, again, can become a member. And it's one of the perks that they receive.
Okay, so did you have anything more that you wanted to tell us about the Stockmen's Association within the 1950s?
Absolutely. Many people who are familiar with the Stockmen's Association know that really got our roots in livestock protection and brand inspection. That's always been a mainstay purpose and objective. Oh, there goes my lights. My lights off. They're automatic lights. Excuse me. But the brand board is significant in the oversight and advice for the association. And that also started in the 1950s. So lots of milestones, again, tied back to the decade that I hadn't realized before.
Julie, in brand inspection, does that only occur when the sale is held at a public during a public sale or livestock auction, or does that also occur with an individual private sale?
Those are great questions. So state law requires brand inspection for cattle, horses, and mules before those animals leave our borders or as they work through marketing channels. Of course, state law also requires that proof of ownership be transferred upon sale. And so depending on the style, there are some other options available in some cases, of bills of sale. But many of those inspections and that transfer of ownership is done by our inspectors that work here for the association.
Oh, okay. And do you find that most ranchers in North Dakota are still branding their cattle?
You know, branding is a very common practice, again, a time-honored way of identifying ownership, and something that we see widespread throughout, North Dakota as just as a basic practice of helping keep animals straight, and certainly something important for our association as well.
Certainly.
So how did you happen to become involved with North Dakota Stockmen's Association? And what are some of the association's purposes? You've touched on some of those. Are there any more? But in the meantime, how did you become involved?
Yeah. As you mentioned in my bio, I am a lifelong cattle producer. I grew up on a registered Angus operation just south of Mandan. And again, fell in love with the livestock industry and agriculture. I think many people involved in our industry have found the values of hard work and stewardship of animals and the land. And that's something that I always enjoyed. I also enjoy communication and working with people, writing, communicating, those types of things. And so I tried to find a career that could meld my interests in agriculture as well as my communication. And so ultimately, that's the career or the major that I pursued. I worked out of college for just a stint as a newspaper reporter before I got a call one day that an opening was coming up at the Stockmen's Association in the communications area. My predecessor was getting married and moving away. And so she encouraged me to apply, and voila, here 28 years ago or whatever it is, here I am.
Wonderful. Why did the Stockmen's Association headquarters move from Minot to Bismarck?
The organization first started in Watford City in the 1920s. And so for a time, the executive officers and the leaders came from the western part of the state. Over time, the organization grew and became more of a statewide organization. And I think that was probably to be more centrally located. And also, I think, speaks to some of the focal points of working and representing producers at the Capitol, and interfacing with more people. And so I think that there was a draw to come to the capital city for that reason.
What has been the most challenging in your job, Julie?
Wow, the most challenging in my job. You know, one of the things that I love, and probably is one of the most challenging thing, is every day there's something new, right? Our organization takes great pride in representing livestock producers and helping be their voice and represent them in the challenges so they can focus at the task at hand, right? Raising cattle and providing high quality beef for people around the world. And so sometimes those challenges might be a government regulation, or it might be an activist organization and some misinformation propagated from others. But we really roll with the punches, and maybe being nimble and responsive. Maybe that's the most challenging, but probably also the most rewarding too.
Yes, right. At the present time, the women, wives, partners of members of the North Dakota Stockmen Association are called North Dakota Cattlewomen. Is that correct? And
yes.
Okay. And prior to that, they were the Cowbells, of which our mom was a member. Can you tell us a little bit about the I'm going to call it the women's organization of the North Dakota Stockmen, yet I'm assuming that there are women as members of the North Dakota Stockmen's Association too.
Yeah, so that also has an interesting 1950s twist too. As you mentioned, now the organization known as the North Dakota Cattlewomen is thriving. They do wonderful work in the terms of research and promotion of the beef product. You can find them in the grocery stores, educating consumers, or in classrooms, educating young people. But they started with the name of the North Dakota Cowbells, started in 1951, actually. And so developed as an auxiliary organization to the Stockmen's Association. Many of those members would also be members of the North Dakota Stockmen's Association. And so continue again with their real strong promotional mission, but very much integrated and work collaboratively with our organization, and proud to have them as partners.
Yes.
Do they still support a beef cook-off?
Yeah, so the National Beef Cook-Off has changed a little bit, and so probably not the exact same as we remember, right? That was a very large event, both on the state level as well as the national level. But the focus on educating consumers about how to utilize high quality beef in recipes and finding ways to make it convenient for families really is a mainstay for their organization and all of us involved in the cattle industry. Because we want consumers to be able to utilize our product and satisfy, not only the need and to get your family fed, but also to enjoy the nutrition and the delicious flavor, that we're very proud of.
How is recipe development within the beef organization occurring? Is it with the individual North Cattlewomen members? Is it a part of the Stockmen's Association? Or does it go on a national level?
Yeah, that's a great question. And probably everybody has a hand, right, in developing recipes. I bet you do at your house. If you're like mine, you see what's in your fridge and you dump a bunch of things together, right? And come up
Might not be documented though.
But new product development and recipe development very much is a focal point of programs within our beef checkoff. People might be familiar with the education and research effort funded by producers when they sell livestock, but that really is a focal point again too of coming up with new ideas, even identifying new cuts that are available by different processes or whatever through the harvest process. But yeah, very much so to stay on the cusp and to be provide a product that fits into the diet and gives variety as well to fit into lots of different palates.
Well, with the upcoming warmer weather, and it'll begin to be more grilling season again, do you find that more beef is sold during the warm weather months just because of the grilling aspect? Or is there something else that you can help attribute to that?
Yes, so grilling season is very much a focal point for, again, for beef sales, especially in the United States. At my house, right, we have beef 3 times a day. And so that not everybody eats that as frequent, but certainly grilling season kind of brings that to the limelight course, we find that, beef fits into the diet in lots of different ways. And so if you're looking for the warmer comfort food, there's, the wonderful stews and roasts and prime ribs, right, that find their way to the dinner table. And again, the versatility of ground beef and steaks for the grill will certainly be a highlight. And as I look out my window, we're maybe not that far away.
Right. Well, this Fun Chat will stream after Easter, I believe it is. But at our house, we're having pot roast for our family. So I think that you would like that.
Yeah.
Before we leave this topic, I wanted to mention ground beef used in brownies. Have you ever tasted that?
I have, and I think that was probably a cowbell recipe, right?
It was, right.
It's been a long time, but yeah. You wouldn't realize the versatility, right?
Right. You get your protein in your brownie.
When you talk about marketing North Dakota beef, is it primarily within the state of North Dakota, within the United States, or is North Dakota beef sold outside of this country as well?
Yes, all of those things. Of course, North Dakota is largely a cow-calf producing state. So the majority of our producers are raising mother cows and raising calves. Many of them are being born on ranches here in North Dakota right now. We have some feeding. And so, many of those calves would be backgrounded after they're weaned and some finishing. But largely, most of our cattle still will go out of state and be finally finished or whatever. That being said, there's marketing of beef. Both that is what's processed here. There's that's processed out of state, and that goes again all across the United States and the world. We've taken a little dip here the last couple of years because of the strength of the U.S. dollar, but imports or exports from U.S. beef to other countries have been at all-time high. And again, the world recognizing the high quality value of the protein that we raise here in North Dakota in the United States. In many cases, some of those countries becoming more affluent and able to afford higher quality proteins as well. Also, go ahead.
Can you think of a country or countries that where specifically do you have that information where North Dakota beef is processed or used? Purchased?
U.S. wide, some of our largest customers, of course, are neighboring countries, Canada and Mexico. But also there's a very large export market in the Pacific Rim. So Japan, Korea, the Philippines have long been strong U.S. beef customers. Interestingly, a few years ago, there was a trade agreement with China. And so, of course, massive population there and some opportunity to grow a market where we haven't been in before. So again, all over the world, our neighbors buy a lot of North Dakota U.S. beef. But again, send a lot of that to the Pacific Rim. And in some cases, their choices are different than what maybe you and I would prefer to have on our table, different cuts because of the different cultural preferences for different kinds of beef, which helps drive the value up of the carcass for North Dakota beef producers.
Yeah. So who takes care of the negotiations when the beef is sent out of the country?
Yeah, so that would be an interplay, right? So there, of course, would be private companies or whatever that are marketing beef. There's also industry-led initiatives. We have partners, the U.S. Meat Export Federation, for instance. It's somewhat checkoff funded and also receives some government dollars through our market access program dollars that help promote that on a national basis. And get the word out. Of course, that's difficult for individual producers to fly across the country, right, or across the world and do that. And so it's a pooling of resources to tell the story of U.S. beef and U.S. beef production and how that can work in diets all around the world.
How have you been involved with any trade missions to foreign countries?
While I have not gone out of the country for a trade mission, we have received many international trade groups, again, promoting not only U.S. beef, but also genetics that we raise here. That's one thing that our family really enjoys throughout, particularly through the summer. We host a lot of international groups that come to the United States and then are looking at different livestock genetics. And it's not always feasible to sell a bull or a female, of course, and send them across the world. But there are ways that they're able to utilize genetics that we have here in the forms of embryos or semen that they are able to adapt in their herds. And so often we'll come to the United States and to see how those genetics are working and see the progeny here on the ground, and then are able to incorporate that back. And so it's been fun to interface with people from all around the world. And while our language might be different, our core values, right, and the desire of taking care of the animals and the land really is universal, and fun to be able to visit with people who have those shared interests.
You come from a multi-generational family background of raising beef cattle. What would your grandfather say about his marketing methods of Angus cattle, beef cattle, breeding cattle versus now, what you are able to do today?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my grandfather, Paul Schaff, was born in 1901. And so he passed away when I was a first grader. So I never had a chance to know him real well or real long, but the stories about him, really have followed in his legacy. And I hope that he would be proud. What I do know about him is that relationships were important, and making sure that people were pleased with the animals that they purchased. And again, just those good core values of taking care of your customers and understanding what their expectations are. That might have been many years ago, right, when he was marketing livestock, that he was with us. But I think that those basic values of understanding what your customers' needs are and providing them with a quality product remains the same as it did then.
How would he have marketed your ranch's cattle in the 1950s or even ahead of that? Right.
So our family got involved in the registered Angus business just right ahead of the 50s, so kind of the mid 40s. And so that evolved over the years too, but largely the same. Again, through a production sale was the main method. And so, yeah, I remember that very well. In fact, back in those days, our family had 2 production sales a year. Oh, glutton for punishment, right? a lot of work. But again, making that information available and identifying the needs of your customers and the different kinds of cattle and the traits that you want to propagate and that they'll succeed in their herd really is what we focus on now too. And so a lot the same, although the marketing methods, of course, now we have digital options and lots of opportunities where there was a more finite list of choices before. But at the end of the day, the system's much the same.
Do you work with different breed organizations, beef breed organizations in the state or even in the national level?
Yes, we absolutely do. There's I believe 10 or 11 statewide breed associations that are very active here within the state. One of the divisions that the Stockmen's Association has is a seed stock council, which is made up of representatives of those different breeds. And so they come together and provide programming and input that's pertinent to their sector and finding ways to enhance their ability to service the needs of commercial customers and commercial breeders out there. So yes, very much within our organization, and then have the opportunity to work at the national level too. It's a small family, right, in the livestock industry. And so even though it would be a national organization, we still interface very frequently.
In previously, when you were talking about raising livestock and the cow-calf operations, and then you mentioned the term backgrounding. Can you, before they went to the feeder, can you explain that term, please? Backgrounding?
I sure can. So backgrounding, when we refer to that, a calf will be weaned from its mother. So it'll be largely, its nourishment will come from mama's milk and grass. And then after that animal is weaned, again, mostly springboard calves in North Dakota, and most of those calves would be weaned sometime in the fall. And then often, because of the plentiful feedstuffs that we have here in North Dakota, many producers will feed those newly weaned calves for a period of time, maybe 45 days, maybe 90 days, maybe longer, depending on their setup and their individual situation. But that helps get them acclimated to a different type of ration, and then eventually will go on to be finished and then find their way into the food chain. But again, plentiful resources that we have here in our state, and many cow-calf operations will background their calves for a period.
Yes. When we talk about legislation for the beef cattle industry, especially in North Dakota. Can you highlight a particular law that you might have had some push with and lobbying efforts with in order to get it passed in the state?
Yeah, and that would be one of the arms of the association. Kind of one of the focal points is providing kind of a government affairs representation to producers. There's been lots of different topics, right? So at every legislative session, I'll spend every day at the Capitol, and so we might monitor a couple hundred bills during the session, and they really run the gamut from property rights to property taxes to real specific livestock-oriented type bills, livestock development, but as I think back over my career, one I think that was noteworthy and I'm very proud of was some reform to what I would call our posting laws. And that really is rooted in private property rights. North Dakota is different than many other places in the United States where in order to keep people off, you need to have a physical posting of your land. And that's been frustrating, for landowners of the years, that because it's private property and in some cases there's trespassing and other problems that have taken place. And so we have long held that land should just be assumed closed without somebody asking permission. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, that's been a controversial topic in some cases and debated for decades. We were able to make some real monumental change, I think, in my mind here a couple of sessions ago by changing, what those requirements are somewhat. One, to provide an electronic posting option for hunting trespass. So it makes it easier for sportsmen and women, as well as landowners, to post their land and have a better relationship. And we also had some, I think, monumental reform related to fenced property that came as a result of some a state Supreme Court decision. And again, something that our state has argued about for years and years. And I think we found some common ground and are making some real progress for property rights, as well as the relationships between landowners and sportsmen.
What do you know what might have been the hot topic for legislation of the North Dakota Stockmen's Association back in the 50s?
Well, probably not specifically. I do know kind of big, whether it be at the state legislation or not, there were some major issues coming off the war. Still were some price controls for beef. That was a challenge. I know on the national scene. There also was some evolution of maybe terminal markets taking a little less smaller role in the evolution of auction markets as we know them today. And so those were some big changes that were occurring in the livestock industry during that era. Whether or not I suspect that there would be some legislation pertinent to that as well. The specific bills or whatever I'm not familiar with, but big topics that I know that they wrestled with.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems as though that today the terminal livestock market is basically dwindled away. But yeah, at least where we're from and what I'm associated with, where such as in North Dakota, in West Fargo, or in St. Paul. Mm-hmm. But it seems as though the smaller livestock marketing opportunity is still available in different towns. Those sale barns are still going and still going strong, it seems to me, in what I know. Can you address that as far as the changes that might have been occurring since the 50s in regard to where livestock, beef cattle, are marketed in North Dakota?
Mm-hmm. Right. As you described, there has been a change, right, from those terminal markets, which were the mainstay back in that era. Again, we have thriving auction markets here in North Dakota and across the country. Over the years, we've also seen the evolution of other marketing channels. We talked a little bit about, some of the marketing of the beef, but same thing with the cattle, right? So many cattle would be contracted directly off the farm. We see that. We've seen the evolution of internet marketing and video marketing. And so things that, my grandparents never would have dreamt of, right? We wouldn't have dreamt of years mm-hmm. ago, but a mm-hmm. lot of variety. On the beef side too, thinking about that, in 2020, of course, the world was in a spin with the pandemic, and people found creative ways of sourcing beef at that time. We all know what the grocery stores looked like in those shelves. And one of the things that flew off the shelf, again, high quality protein. People are looking to feed their family and spend more time at home. that actually was kind of a catalyst for a lot of livestock producers in our state and around the country to explore direct marketing of beef. And we really have seen that take off, again, kind of as a product of the pandemic. And so a variety of different ways that we have at our disposal now to sell cattle or to sell meat.
And it seems as though, too, there's been another evolution regarding the livestock industry, and that's the transportation of them. Since the 1950s, how has that changed?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. We don't talk about cattle being moved by rail anymore, right? And so very different of how people sold their calf crops and went off to market. And again, also related issues. So that would be a truck and trailer kind of situation. And it's also involved the Stockmen's Association to weigh in on things about transportation, whether it be ensuring that we have, safe roads, both paved highways, as well as the farm to market county roads. Also things about like the electronic logging devices, and again, finding ways that and making sure that regulations are responsive to the animals and the animal welfare that we have of getting them safely from point A to point B. And certainly a different twist, again, because, cattle are moved differently than they were a half century ago.
Are those cattle moved to, as Judy mentioned, West Fargo or St. Paul? Where's their final destination usually?
Yeah, so it really depends on what the end game is for them. They might be, here in North Dakota, most of those would be, cow calf calves that would be either moved to a feedlot. There's not as many of those that would go directly to harvest, although some of those that would be sold off the farm might go directly to a packing plant. So it really depends on, again, every individual situation. But it's amazing how many times those animals move and how transportable they really are.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about the final destination, the packing company.
Right.
And is there anything left in West Fargo or not?
No longer. No longer the plant that was there that has closed. As far as processors, of course, we would have some smaller, more regional processors that would be here within our state. As far as large scale processing plants, many of them still flow south. That would be the majority. There's one right at the border into South Dakota. And of course, a lot of cattle would move to Nebraska and then ultimately be harvested there. Would be the beef processing kind of main area within the country.
So south rather than Chicago.
Yeah.
Do you find also that North Dakota calves, once they're weaned and or background, do they tend to go to feedlots outside of the state, or do many of them stay in the state of North Dakota?
Yeah, so we do have a large backgrounding sector, as I mentioned. So a lot of cow-calf operations would have those. There's also those that do custom feeding for others or purchase those North Dakota grown calves and will feed them here. So a variety. One of the divisions the Stockmen's Association actually has, we call it our Environmental Services Division, and it helps livestock producers come into environmental compliance and set up their feeding systems, their animal feeding systems, with some cost share and some technical assistance. And that's really has helped grow the feeding opportunities in North Dakota. We're proud of that program, about 20 years old here in the country or in our state. So a lot of feeding done here. Again, more of that would be backgrounding than finishing, but that too has evolved over the years and provides some opportunity.
Well, Jackie, did you have something?
Well, I will go to a different topic now. You want to continue on that one, or
No.
May I move? Okay. So, as vice president of this association, what is the most unusual experience you've had?
Oh, wow. The most unusual experience I've had. That is a very good question and a hard one.
Thank you. We'd like a very good answer too.
Okay, well.
Dressed as a beef cow and walking in a parade, right?
Well, I've never dressed as a beef cow walking in a parade, but I tell you what, though, I am the proud mother of 5 children, and again, I grew up in this organization. I come to work here just shortly after college, and so my kids don't know mom other than Stockmen's mom, and so I've had a son who dressed up in a chicken suit with a eat beef sign that walked in a parade. One of my daughters wore a bull costume for the beef and up run. So yeah, they get involved in lots of variety, right? Just by being the nature of being my child.
Well, that sounds like fun.
What's this beef and up run?
Oh, so that actually was part of our convention last year that we had in Watford City. So we wanted to provide other opportunities for family members in the community to get involved in the organization, even if they weren't part of the meetings or the membership. And so we provided a 5K fun walk and run, again, celebrating the zinc, iron, and protein and all the wonderful nutritional benefits of beef in an active lifestyle. And so we invited the community. So yeah, little Sheridan, she got a little beef and she was the little mascot for the run.
Nice. How fun.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Oh, but to your question, wow, the most unique, there's been a lot of wonderful and unique experiences. Years ago, then President Trump came to North Dakota, came to Mandan, and was promoting some tax reform. Certainly the estate tax are concerned to livestock producers, small family businesses and such. And that's been a long held policy of the association to find some reform there. And so had a chance to attend the rally. He actually told a story and recognized me in the crowd as a thought leader in that area, and why farm and ranch families, it was important to find some policy changes there to help in the generational transfer of operations. And so, yeah, there's all kinds of unique opportunities. Some days we go to work and we have a business suit and heels on, and other days, right, we put on the muck boots and get to be, with the cattle. So a wonderful opportunity and variety, and just always proud to work on behalf of North Dakota's cattlemen and women.
Right. Sounds as if you are the exact correct person for the job.
Well, you never know what you're going to get into, but take great pride to work for such wonderful people and a great industry.
Yes.
Julie, we're nearing the end of our fun chat. This has been great. But can you look ahead into the future and see what your children might have to go through in order to stay in the beef cattle business that you have in your family?
Yeah. Well, certainly there's wonderful opportunities, right, in our industry. And I think that our the next generation is going to benefit from the incorporation and adaptation of all the technology and genetic advances. So that's been a continual role, and so exciting to see those opportunities. Of course, there's also challenges. We have increased government regulation. We have probably more scrutiny from the outside. Less people are directly connected to the farm and ranch. And so I think it will be important for our generation and those to follow to continue to have a dialogue with our consumers so they understand what it is that we're doing to raise cattle and provide safe, wholesome food. And so I think that those are dynamics that will continue to grow, particularly as our population changes and the background within agriculture is. But lots of opportunity. It's a fun time to be in the cattle business, and certainly a rewarding industry in a rewarding way of life.
Wonderful. Thank you for serving as the spokesperson for North Dakota Stockmen. We're just so grateful, Julie Ellingson, that you have joined us today for this fun chat. Jackie, where can you take us to close our program?
I'll just mention a couple things. First, viewers, take a look at the red button. That's the subscribe button. We'd appreciate you touching that, as well as the blue thumbs up button. So until next time, well, tell your friends and even your family about the 1950s fun chat. So till next time, toodaloo.
Bye-bye.